The Walking Dead is a series that is loved by many. So a lot of people, it's their favorite show of the all time. And it's easy to see why. Guys, has a collection of incredible moments and episodes, not to mention the characters so iconic that even if you don't watch the show, you know who is Rick Grimes and Daryl Dixon. Alright, so however, every story has an end. And when we're talking about The Walking Dead, that ain't happening much earlier than it should have. And even as a fan, you might not even realize the series actually officially ended in 2022. It clearly faded into obscurity over time. So this didn't happen because one of specific factor, but rather several. However, there was one in particular that signed the show's death warrant. All right, so today we are going to discuss how Rick's departure was effectively the end of The Walking Dead. Before we explain why Rick exits caused the series to fall apart, we have to admit that The Walking Dead was already struggling. Alright, so many people say the series is perfect up until the 6th season. Alright, so the 6th season, and that if you start watching, you should stop there. Let's agree that the all-out war arc against Negan is seasons 7 and 8 is the darkest part of the show. Alright, so and by dark, I don't mean scary, I mean actually bad, and the season 7 is just slow and empty, but season 8 is beyond saving. Alright, so to me, the only things that save that season are the characters. Alright, so and only two, to be honest: Negan, the main villain of at the time, and Rick Grimes, guys, the protagonist. Yeah, but throughout the entire series, Rick character is the only one without flaws in terms of writing. Alright, and they always kept his dialogue and development at the highest level. So much of why Rick Grimes was so good is also due to the actor. Alright, so Andrew Lincoln is an incredible performer, and it's surprising he never won an Emmy for this role. And he could take a simple script and make it look incredible just through his interpretation. Alright? It's a general consensus that Rick carried the show on his back. So The Walking Dead is a dependent on Rick as Breaking Bad is dependent on Walter White. And can you imagine Breaking Bad without our favorite bald chemist? And the show simply wouldn't exist, and that's my point. There is no show without Rick Grimes. So even with ensemble episodes where he doesn't appear, the narrative of the season and the series as a whole depends on him. If he had to leave the show, which he did, and it would have required a massive preparation, so we wouldn't feel that void. And that's exactly what failed the show failed to do. The season 8 is with Rick finally winning the war against Negan, and all the communities were supposed to enter on a state of harmony. But even through he won the war, it felt like he lost because it's in season it's like, how can I explain? It felt like because this season that the show makes the biggest mistake. All right, so the death of Cole, and how do you explain this? Cole was raised and taught from a young age, and how to survive in this world. All right, so Cole was raised and taught from a young age to deal with it, and how to deal with people, and how to become a leader. Um, he was the protagonist's son, and he was the one who would likely become the leader in the future. So Cole like was the future of the series, like, and his death killed all the expectation of just for the sake of shock value, right? Let it put in these terms, because The Walking Dead relied on creating shocking deaths to boost ratings, and since the season 8 was the worst, all right, and so far, and the audience was like dropping, and they decided to kill off the one character who didn't deserve it, and this was so absurd that even the actors were caught by surprise. And Chandler Riggs, the actor who played Cole, had just bought a house near the filming locations to make things easier for future seasons, and only to receive locations, not locations, but only to receive what was essentially a Terminator ladder, and some say it was because Chandler was 2018, meaning the studio would have to pay him an adult salary, which was more expensive, but that's no excuse. All right, that's no excuse to remove the character so vital to the plot. It was a gamble for shock value to raise ratings, and they lost everything on it. So Andrew Lincoln was extremely disappointed by this. While there are no confirmed quotes that he chose to leave because of the Cole's death, there was a massive factor. Like, he explained in interviews that losing Cole, one of Rick's main motivations, and made him feel like his character story had reached the end of the book, not just a chapter. Like, and the search of for his family is what kept Rick alive at the start of the show, and losing Cole remove that narrative engine. And behind the scenes, Andrew was reportedly devastated, crying for hours, and after filming Cole's death scene, demonstrating the strong the strong bond between the actors. And then comes a season 9, a fresh start, and the first 4 episodes were built up the protagonist's departure, and I'll say this: those early episodes of season 9 are some of the best in the entire series. Ode White Birdie Rick. Alright, the White Birdie Rick is how can I say it? It's perhaps the best version of the character, more experienced, more human. Rick in his prime, let's put on this. And his final episode, what comes after, is a masterpiece, because the returns of Herschel and Shane and the callbacks, it was a beautiful ending for Rick, but an ending that never should have happened, right? That never should have happened. So after Rick departure, the Walking Dead, the Walking Dead was never the same. You can argue that's the Whisperers, arc was cool, but it doesn't compare to the peak of seasons 4, 5, and 6. And sorry to Daryl fans, but he cannot carry the show on his back alone. And you feel the whole, you feel the essence of the show is gone. You feel that this brings us to back to Cole. If he hadn't died, he could have been the missing piece. With Rico's departure and the time jump, he would have bad. We would have an adult experienced Cole as a protagonist and capable of carrying the series. All right, so imagine Cole facing off against let me put this. So all right, you can imagine this, like he's facing off against Alpha instead of a Daryl, a Rick 2.0. In the comics, that's exactly what happens. Rick eventually takes a backseat, all right, the backseat, and Cole becomes to a new leader of the whole thing, all right, and that is the strategy of the show. Over time, it just looked mistake after mistake. We could have had a legendary series we witnessing Cole becoming the GOAT, all right, but they killed him for a cheap shock. In the end, we are left imagining what could have been. All right, the fact remains, Rick's departure was the biggest mistake ever made in The Walking Dead.